So I wanted to recap a lot of the news for, I guess the future of The Walking Dead, especially when it comes to like Rick Grimes and Michonne, obviously coming back to The Walking Dead. And I am working on my recap video, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be recapping everything story-wise for The Walking Dead over the last like little bit here, obviously from The Walking Dead, the final season, going through the spinoffs and everything up until Daryl Dixon season 3 and talking about the future and everything. But I really wanted to get into this here because the one thing that I see quite a bit is a lot of people saying that they haven't watched The Walking Dead in a bit, and so now they're getting back into it. And where's Rick and Michonne? Like, are Rick and Daryl going to reunite? And so I want to kind of get into, what they've said about everything over the last little bit here. But more specifically, I want to talk about Danai Gurira's comments because it's something that honestly, when the comments were made at the time, not a lot of talk happened about it. And I feel like her comments combined with what Andrew Lincoln said last year really does say a lot about, I think, where this next story could go. And so I really wanted to recap all of that and sort of talk about, where things are at right now in terms of what we've learned in the last couple of weeks here. So if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this, then definitely make sure to be a subscriber, especially if you want to get my recap video, because I will be posting that possibly later on tonight, but for sure tomorrow, because obviously season 3 is airing on Sunday, so that's going to be out right away. And then right after that, I will do my Q&A video because I know I'm late with that. Now, to get into what Danai Gurira said here about, I guess the future and everything. And so I will say a lot of her comments since The Ones Who Live has aired has really just been a lot of like, well, I can't say anything, right? And so to me, I think that, they likely know that Rick and Michonne could come back at some point, but it's one of those things where I think you have to be smart about having those characters come back. Like, I don't see the characters just coming back full time in any way where it's like, obviously if there's another series and it's like 2 seasons, maybe 3, I could see that. But I think getting another series where it's going to be 8 seasons or 11 seasons like The Walking Dead, I don't see that happening anymore. I really don't. I think that it's going to be one of those things where it's like The Ones Who Live. Every couple of years, we're going to get like a series like that sort of thing, right? So I could see that happening with the characters here, obviously, if the story is right? Like, that's the biggest part about all this. The story has to work. It has to be like The Ones Who Live. Andrew Lincoln has said that, and I actually agree with that. I think there's a lot of characters out there that they could reunite with. You could actually come up with a really incredible story there, but it has to matter overall and make a lot of sense. I feel like the issue with a lot of it, honestly, is because like the sets are gone, right? Like Alexandria is gone, the Commonwealth. I believe a lot of the sets are gone now. So to have, them come back at some point, they got to rebuild all of that. And so I could see it definitely happening. It's not like that's, out of the question. They build a lot of sets all the time. It's just, they would have to go and do all of that. So I think that's the thing when it comes to the story here and why The Ones Who Live ended like it did. I think it's just one of those things where when you're looking at The Ones Who Live, I think the reason why it ended like it did is really just that. Like, I think they didn't want to go and rebuild all the sets and everything. And I think that's the one thing with The Ones Who Live and how it ended was really like, that's why it wasn't an open field. It was because they didn't really have any other sets. Like, they couldn't really have Alexandria there. And I don't think they worked out enough of the story there where they were like, does it make sense to have the characters there? And I am wondering about that, like a future story. Would they be back in Alexandria? Is that a place that they would go to? Because Alexandria, I don't even think was really Judith's home by the end of The Walking Dead. They were kind of staying at the Commonwealth and stuff. So, yeah, I have a lot of questions about that. And that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of little details like that with the world. That would be really exciting to see. Like, I know Maggie and everyone kind of left the Hilltop and stuff, but it would be cool to see in a future series all these characters going back to these places and seeing what these places are like now. Like, they left the Hilltop. They took a lot of resources from the Hilltop. So is that place completely abandoned now, or has it been turned into something else? And same thing with Alexandria and, a lot of other communities. Like, I just have a lot of questions about all of that just in general. And I think it would be cool to see, another story set there, just to see things different here and how that would work with the CRM and a lot of other things like that. And so let's get into what Danai Gurira had to say here. So this is what she had to say. And first of all, a lot of the questions here were like, is there going to be a season 2? Is there going to be any more? And she would say, well, I can't say anything, right? And this is what she had to say when the question was more like, well, hypothetically, just assuming that this is the end and whatever, like, what would the story be like or whatever? Like, what do you think Michonne and them would be doing right now, really, right? And this is what she had to say. Well, I think they are aware that they have to find the balance of home, but also the balance of their responsibility to think larger than themselves. I think even the connection that they've had now with the city that the CRM was working with, that's an alliance, a connection that they have a responsibility to now. Quite honestly, because they destroyed the army, is those are people, those are good people who are doing good things. So I think they have, having seen what bad can be done with power, I think it is their responsibility to figure out the opposite beyond themselves, beyond their family, because that's who they are. So I think that right there tells us a lot of, what that story would be like in the very, I guess, beginning, right? I do think when you're looking at Rick and Michonne's story, the CRM is going to be involved again. There's no way they're just going to ignore the CRM. There's just no way that makes a lot of sense. But I think the CRM, the military part, is just kind of gone. And they have an alliance with that city. So that city is going to be a big part of the Commonwealth. And a lot of that, right? Like there actually is going to be an alliance between the Commonwealth and the CRM now. And Rick and Michonne, they know what power can do to a place like that. So they're really going to try and obviously not have people in power that do this or that. They're going to help, obviously, a lot of other communities and stuff. And I think that, honestly, things are going to be very big in terms of a story, right? Like, you're going to have these huge communities like that I think that's just sort of the natural place to go. I think to go to a story that's much smaller in scale would just be a little like, wait, what? Because there's all these other communities out there. I think that that's why Dead City is kind of frustrating, because that's a show that is like really close to all these places, but ignores all of it. And it's like, why are you ignoring all those places? Like, those places are really exciting and cool. You're ignoring everything. And it's just like, I don't know, kind of frustrating, I guess, right? So I think that that's the thing. Like, you have to have the story around here. So I think they would be at home. And I think maybe not living at the Commonwealth, really. But it really depends. Honestly, I think that it's up to, I guess, what they decide is right for Rick and Michonne. Like, where does it make sense for them to live? I know that in a sense, it makes sense to go back to Alexandria, because Alexandria was like their home. Carl is there and stuff. I just don't know. Like, Rick, that makes sense. But for Michonne, Judith, and RJ, I feel like maybe Alexandria at this point is just something that brings bad memories almost. And it's maybe one of those things where it's like, we should just start something new, right? And somewhere else. And so I could totally see, honestly, a version of the ending of the comics where you have Carl living out there in like this cabin or whatever, this old house in this field, and there's like no walkers around. I could totally see that. Like, maybe they just found a house somewhere and they're just staying there, and there's this open field and there's not a lot of walkers around because the CRM are everywhere and the Commonwealth and everything, and things are just sort of peaceful. They go out there to help other communities, but obviously spend a lot of time with their family. I think that is where you start there, and you see Rick, Michonne, Judith, and RJ very, very happy. Now, as to where the story is likely going to go after this, that is where it is interesting, because obviously to have Rick and Daryl reunite, that's going to be the thing that everyone's talking about, right? Like, how do these characters reunite, and how do you have a story of them trying to survive together when things could obviously be very happy and peaceful? And I think what I've sort of said there is likely going to be what the story is going to be for the first episode. And I think that's just the setting of, what their lives have been like at the very start of, that reunion show of all the characters reuniting. I don't really see any other way you could do it besides maybe, I don't know, because I think the thing is, having the characters be that happy for the last couple of years is something that a lot of people are going to want to see, because it's just like, oh, that's amazing. Like, they've been so happy for a while, right? Because that's the thing about The Ones Who Lives ending. People like that ending because they're happy. And I think just to have them in a different situation and things have not been happy, it's almost going against that. So I think you got to start the season in a way where it respects that ending. And it's like, yeah, things have been good for a couple of years now, kind of thing, right? And so I think how Daryl fits into all of this here with this story, I really do think that's where you have to come up with a different villain. That's why the variant walkers were so perfect, and maybe that could still be a thing, but there has to be something that fits in there, because Andrew Lincoln said before that he would like Rick's next story to be simplistic survival horror. And I've talked about that before. Like, that's a big part, I think, to, I guess Andrew Lincoln wanting to come back, is he wants that survival, aspect to it, because he likes the characters, I guess being in really stressful situations and like, what do they do? How do they get out of this? And so I would really like to see how that would work here. And I think that's why, I don't know what spinoff would set this up, because the thing about The Ones Who Live is that it had the CRM set up from way before, right? I don't think there's going to be set up from these spinoffs. Maybe that's the plan now, but they have to set it up somehow. And I think having a villain out there, again, it could literally just be a post-credit scene. That's the thing, too. They could just have a post-credit scene that's totally unrelated, like they did in World Beyond, that set up Daryl Dixon in the future. I could see that happening. And another question I have, too, is Laurent and Ash. How do they fit into all of this here? I really do think that they are the key to a lot of this. I think if they showed up in the finale of season 4, it just makes a lot of sense, because that's my whole thing when it comes to the question of, like, will Daryl and Carol even go back to America? What if they just decide, you know what, we're happier here, we're just going to stay here, and that's it. We're happy in Spain, and that's literally just going to be our life now. We're going to travel around everywhere. As much as that, like, almost does make sense for the characters, there's a lot of frustration there because of, like, well, you want to reunite with Rick, and also there's a big plot hole there, right? Because Laurent and Ash went to America, and obviously they were going to the Commonwealth, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that was mentioned. Actually, yeah, I do believe that was mentioned. And so that's the thing. If the characters are going back to the Commonwealth, like, they're going to mention, like, well, we were sent here because of Daryl and Carol. I'm just thinking of, like, what it makes sense story-wise. And you have Laurent and Ash in a plane. They arrive close to the Commonwealth or whatever. Maybe they just arrive in America just in general, and then they travel to the Commonwealth, which is in Ohio. And then you would have to obviously explain why you're there. And you would say, well, you know, I was with Daryl and Carol, and they sent me here, and they're in Europe, they're in France, and they're in trouble, basically. They need help. I think that right there just makes the most sense. And so if the show ends with them just staying in Europe, and that is just sort of ignored, that just makes no sense to me. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's why I really do think that it's all going to make sense by the end. We have 4 seasons of this show. I think the Commonwealth is going to help Daryl and Carol get back home, or the CRM. Like, I really do believe that is how they're going to get home, because I don't really know how else they're going to get home. They could just find a boat. They could find another plane, or just like anything else. But I feel like because they're constantly trying to find a boat, and they're constantly trying to find a way to get back home, that it's going to be different in the finale. It's not going to be that simple. Like, okay, we have a boat, now we're just going to go back. I think they're actually going to get rescued and brought back home. And so Rick could be there, possibly, or it's just, you know, the CRM show up in general, but maybe Rick was somewhere else. And, you know, obviously just help came and brought Daryl and Carol back home. And then in the end, we see Daryl and Carol back in America, and like, that's the ending there. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think in terms of all the characters reuniting, again, that's where you have to come up with a villain and all of that. And I think that is sort of what we're waiting to see. I think season 3 and season 4, I'm really excited to see how they're going to set up the ending here and how these characters are all going to reunite, because I really do believe that they're all going to reunite at some point. The Ones Who Live was way too successful to just be one season. Even if it is just one season, to have all the characters all back together again, it's something that we've been wanting for a very, very long time now, ever since Rick, you know, I guess left the show, you know, in season 9, episode 5. It was just a really sad moment to see that happen. And I think to have Rick and Daryl reunite will be honestly really amazing, especially if it happens in 2028, because at that point, it'll have been literally 10 years since, you know, Rick and Daryl were actually on screen together, which is crazy to think. Like, 10 years. I can't believe we had to wait that long. Like, I really can't believe it. Anyways, I'm gonna leave it here though, so definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.